Thanks very much, Marianne. As Marianne alluded to, I graduated from the United States Naval Academy in 1969, and then I went into naval intelligence. Served for 4 years in Southeast Asia and other places. And I can see the veterans starting to have their eyes glass over. I have tried to convince my daughters and anybody who I speak to that naval intelligence is not an oxymoron. Those of us who served in intelligence actually did some good things every now and then. After all, they say if you're right 80% of the time, you're having a good day in intelligence. Today, I'm going to talk about the Afghan Refugee Resettlement Group. And we were founded in August of 2021. I got a phone call, as Marianne said, from retired Rear Admiral Tim Flynn, class of 1979, Naval Academy, 28-year veteran from the United States Navy. And turns out Tim was 10 years behind me at the Naval Academy, so he's younger than I am by 10 years. And more critically, he was perfect to lead this team. And if you have any question about that, ask the veteran at your table. But his first name was Admiral. And let me tell you, when somebody has a first name of Admiral calls on the phone, people tend to listen. So I worked in the shadows. Tim was the front man, and we were off and running. We have a team of all veterans. We are all volunteers. Personally, I'm well over 6,000 hours since August of 2021 in working on this, and my wife Betsy can tell you some war stories about middle of the night phone calls. But we are all committed to helping those who were loyal to the United States. Today, I'm going to talk three phases of what we've done. One is from September of 21 through December of 22. Then from February of 23 until now, and then a project that we have locally. At the end, there's going to be an ask. You don't have speakers like me and then not have somebody ask you for something. No, I'm not going to ask you for money, so don't worry about it. Okay, I'm going to ask you to do something. And if you can, I'll ask you to help. So that's the way this is going to go today. Phase one involved getting people out of Afghanistan. And let's start with a geography lesson. Afghanistan is a landlocked country in the heart of Asia. If you speak to an Afghan, they'll say they are the heart of Asia. Why? Because the ancient Silk Road went through Afghanistan. Afghanistan is unique in the history of the world. They have never been conquered by an invading army. From Genghis Khan to present day, no one has been able to successfully conquer Afghanistan. Now, on to what we did. Phase one. We had to get people out of Afghanistan any way possible. The way we were working was through a very well-funded nonprofit by the name of ARRG Group. And we had people in Kandahar, we had people in Kabul, and we had people gathering in Mazar-e Sharif. We gathered them there, we flew them out. I'm not going to get into any more detail, but I was sleeping maybe 2 hours a day for the first 6 months of this operation. That can give you some idea of the complexity. The total we got out in phase one from September of 21 until December 22nd of 2022 was 771. And here are some pictures of the families we got out. This family came out in the first few flights that we were able to get out of Mazar-e Sharif. This family is the family that arrived in the United States on December 22nd of 2022. When they arrived, I took a deep breath and I thought I was done. Well, as in most things, it didn't happen that way. I got a phone call from Admiral Flynn in February of 2023, and he said, "We've got a request." One of our colleagues who worked with us in phase one came to Admiral Flynn and asked if we would help get a group of 18 combat pilots who were all in the same class in flight school out of Pakistan, where they had fled after the fall. Now, little known to most Americans is that the United States trained 265 helicopter pilots who had graduated from Afghanistan's West Point. And once they graduated, they did know how to speak English, but we had to teach them how to speak American English and aircraft English, because the international language of flying is English. They were going to be flying with Special Operations Command people in Afghanistan, so they had to be fluent. They had to learn how to fly. They had to go through ground school and then to advanced flight school. Here's a picture of some of the pilots on the flight line. I'll get out of the way so this table can see. But I want you to focus on one thing. Look at the faces. Can you see in the back? I'm sensitive here to this microphone. Look at the faces. You're going to see tension, worry, concerned, because they're in training. Ask any veteran about going through training and then coming back and actually doing your job. It is a very worrisome time. But these people all had families back in Afghanistan, and they were going to go back and serve and fly helicopters. And helicopters are targets. All right? They were going to take the place of Special Operations Command pilots. These are the three platforms that they flew. One was the Mi-17, which is a helicopter left over from Russian days, and the other two were American helicopters, the UH-60 Blackhawk, which has been the standard helicopter platform for the United States from the late 70s until now. I don't know what version they're on, but they've been through many iterations. And then the MD-530 gunship, which was a very lethal, very quick, very fast gunship that the Taliban feared. Taliban hated these pilots. And the reason they hated them is because they knew how the Taliban thought. So when Special Operations Command was going out on a mission, they always made sure they had at least one helicopter from the squadron of Afghans, because they knew how the Taliban were going to fight. Now, when we started this project in February of 23, the rules had changed a little bit. We started then with no 501c3 nonprofit to whom someone could contribute and then get a tax-deductible contribution. Didn't have that. We didn't have a story. We hadn't developed that. We didn't have a Rolodex or a contact list in current vocabulary. We didn't have a network that we could reach out to help gather money. So the Admiral was doing high-level stuff, and I was kind of doing everything else. And the first thing we did was we had to find a 501c3, which we did. That's the 2430 Group logo here. And these were folks who started that company very shortly after September of 21, and we had helped them. So they agreed to help us. The next thing we had to do was develop a story about the pilots, which, since I was a marketing brand manager at P&G, the Admiral said, "You've got that one." So I started working on a story. Then we had to find some media to be able to tell the story so that we could raise money. Because you see, from February of 23 until now, we have been paying the rent, the utilities, for food, for medical care, for passports, for visas, and for anything else that needed to be done for these Afghan pilots and their families. Just those 18. We took this on. We said, the group doesn't get larger. We've got to work with a finite group, because it was way too confusing if we added others. So we started working on the story. And we got fortunate, because what happened was another Naval Academy graduate, the name of Ward Carroll, who has a YouTube channel and with 400,000 subscribers. He was a class of 1982 Naval Academy. Yes, we're incestuous. I know you're thinking of it now. But he liked the story. He was an F-14 radar intercept officer, and his 400,000 subscribers were going to like it. He interviewed two of the pilots. He interviewed Admiral Flynn, put it on his YouTube channel, and we raised $35,000 in the month of August within 2 weeks after that story hit. And we needed it because what happened next almost was the end of us. This is what you'll find if you do a Google search on Ward Carroll Trapped. If you Google that, you'll find the video that we did. On September 1st at midnight, a new law went into effect in Pakistan that any Afghan in the country without a passport, a valid visa, and an immigration stamp from a border, all three of those, if you didn't have all three, you could be deported. You may remember reading something about that or hearing it on the news. Well, guess what? None of our pilots had a legitimate entry stamp. They'd all fled from Afghanistan in the days after the fall because they were on a kill list. If any of them went back, they would have been shot on sight. And yes, the Taliban had the technology to track that. They had the technology the day after the U.S. left to track cell phones. One of the things I had to do was get everybody using a cell phone messaging service that was encrypted, because they were all using text messages. So that's a detail you probably didn't want to know, but the Taliban are a lot smarter than people think they are. So what happened at midnight was they started rounding up Afghans, some of whom had been in the country for 40 years, and deporting them. Our pilots were a group that needed some assistance. Now, we were fortunate. Back in February of 23, we had to hire a country manager in Pakistan to help us. And that country manager was responsible for doing all of the logistical support these pilots and their families needed. Now, think about that. An Afghan in Pakistan renting property, buying food, making sure they had medical care, working with the Afghan government to get passports issued for children that had been born, getting visas from Pakistan. Pakistan hated Afghans, so they would only issued 90-day visas, and also the entry stamp. The entry stamp was crucial. Our country manager in Pakistan had to do all that. So when this started, it meant that every pilot, every family member had to go to a border entry point and get a legitimate entry stamp. Now, let me explain. That sounds simple. It is anything but. They were in Islamabad. Our country manager had to rent cars, 3 to 4 cars in a convoy. The drivers had to be trusted and known, because when they traveled to the gate, to the Torkham gate, every person in those cars, other than the drivers and our country manager, was illegal. Why? They didn't have a valid entry stamp. 4-hour hair-raising trip to the border, going through 3 to 5 checkpoints where our country manager had to bribe the officers at the checkpoint and everybody who was there to let this convoy through to go to the Torkham gate. They get to the Torkham gate and they park in a parking lot the size of about 12 football fields. A lot of people there. Then our country manager had to get out of the car, find a people smuggler, who knew what Pakistani officer was serving that day. Make the appropriate bribes. The Pakistani immigration officer would then take the pilots and their families into the immigration area, not back into Afghanistan, but close, within shouting distance, and then come back into the entry immigration office and get their passports stamped. That was the critical thing they needed. That took 4 hours. Then it was a 4-hour trip back to Islamabad. Our country manager did this 5 days in a row. Get up at 2 a.m, leave at 3, arrive when when Torcom Gate officially opened at 7, go through the 4-hour process, come back, rinse, repeat, do it again the next night. 5 days in a row. This was absolutely critical for us. And as I said, it almost was the end of us, because if they'd been arrested, we couldn't stop the deportation. It also was expensive. All that money we raised, I spent all of that plus money I borrowed, a total of about $40,000. So we were in debt by the end of September to get all of this done. And 95% of that was bribes. Okay. The 5% of that $40,000 was for the actual service that these folks got. We were successful in that. We were continuing to work the humanitarian parole. And the next big break we got occurred when the Naval Academy Alumni Association, I know it's incestuous, don't talk about that part, but they asked me for an article about this, and I agreed to write it. So I wrote it in the summer, submitted it in September, right in the middle of all this mess with the deportations, and it came into print in January of this year. And this opened up a whole new avenue of exposure. And what happened after the article appeared were people were contacting me right and left, wanting to know how they could help. To date, our organization has raised almost $500,000 in support of this project. And we're doing a number of things to help the Afghans as a result. One is they're flying in Fort Worth. Take a look at these faces, will you? Look here. Do you see any stress? They're safe. They're not worried about waking up tomorrow and not being invaded by the Pakistani police. They know where their next meal is coming from. Their families are safe. And these pilots are flying again. 5 of the 15 that we've successfully resettled to the United States are in flight school at the Helicopter Institute, becoming commercial helicopter pilots. Why? The United States is 2,000 pilots short in helicopters. There are over 100 UH-60s flying in the country right now. They need Black Hawk helicopter pilots. So the pilots are working. They're at flight school. The Helicopter Institute is underwriting some of this. We're underwriting some of this. Not all of it is being covered, and we don't know how we're going to end up covering that. But it's a work in progress. As I said, the mission is still underway. Now, phase 3. We have the pilots in Fort Worth. We have 3 pilots still in Pakistan. 2 have been approved to fly. 1 should be here within the next couple of weeks. 1 may come to the U.S. or he may go to Australia because he has a fiancée down there. We don't know for yet. The 18th pilot has been denied entry for unknown reasons, and we are now mounting a very robust appeal to that. And by robust, I mean we're working at very high levels in the government to see if we can't get that turned around because we think it was an accident. But phase 3 was the Admiral and I talking about the Afghan who served as our country manager in Pakistan. Very unique young man. We found him because of his work with another nonprofit through our colleague who introduced us. We hired him immediately in February of 23. In addition to doing all of the things that he's done to enable our pilots and their families to come to the United States, our country manager saw an unmet need in Pakistan. Afghan children are not welcome in Pakistani schools. So he started a physical school for grades 1 through 6. When he left Pakistan on September 15th, there were 250 students enrolled in that physical school, Afghan boys and girls, grades 1 through 6. He had 12 teachers and 18 staff members taking care of the physical location. 250 children. He recognized that because of the Taliban's rule in Afghanistan that no female be allowed schooling after the 6th grade, he started an online school for grades 7 to 12. Any Afghan girl can get to an internet location, is eligible to enroll. When he left Pakistan on September 15th, there were 500 people, 500 Afghan girls from Afghanistan, Pakistan, Turkey, Libya, all over the European Union and the world in this online school. He had 18 teachers working in the online school. This week, over 2,100 are enrolled. 2,100, and it's growing. The Taliban shut down his enrollment site by hacking it 3 times. The 4th version is still up there. They can't keep this school down. In addition to all that, this young man is now studying at the University of Cincinnati for his master's in business administration, and he is now making an application for the PhD program. It is my great honor and pleasure to introduce the Pakistan country manager for the Afghan Refugee Resettlement Group. He enabled these people to come to the United States, and he is the one that we give credit to. It is my pleasure to introduce Ahmad Bilal Niazi, my guest here. Come on, this is for you. Bilal is considered to be a gifted child. He went to college at 15. He graduated at 19 with 2 degrees, one in economics, one in finance. He and his family fled Pakistan. His father worked for a German nonprofit. He also was on the Afghan national soccer team for 3 years. National team, okay? He knows how to play soccer. He's been to an FC Cincinnati game, loved it. He's on his own, and he is here now studying for his MBA. Now for the ask. No, I'm not going to ask for money. What I'm going to ask for is your assistance in helping him find a job. You see, the way the student visa process works in the United States, Bilal can work for a year after he gets his MBA conferred, and that happens in April. He's making an application right now for a PhD in leadership and entrepreneurship. Obviously, he's a great entrepreneur, having started those 2 schools, and he continues to run them while he's here in Cincinnati, in his spare time, while he's carrying straight A's in 9 courses. This young man is street savvy. He knows how to get things done. He's very creative. He finds a way or makes one, and you veterans can appreciate that. If you or anyone you know or someone in your network who knows someone can help him find a company or business who could use an energetic, competent young man for a year, and it's only for a year, then I'd like you to reach out and contact me. Every one of you has a business card in front of you that has my name on it. My email is there, my cell phone is there. You can text me, you can call me, you can email me with any information you have. Also, I'd like you to reach out and contact me if you have any group that you'd like me to give this presentation to. I'm more than happy to do it. It's our way of giving back. Admiral Flynn sends his best regards to all of you. I am happy to take questions at this point with 2 criteria. No political questions, and no questions about naval intelligence, because I've heard enough about that. Thank you very much.